Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this particular video, I will be discussing the father's seed, the life force, which requires a fertile ground in order to create life. Now, what might I be speaking regarding the father's seed? As a man, what is your seed? Because you see, if you were to specifically look at blaming women regarding now the topic of what happens with said seed, well, you can't blame the woman based on your inability of holding on to said seed. Because the moment you learn to control said seed, you then find that woman no longer has to take the blame. And the idea that if you coming forth, entering the woman, is what allows the continuation of you two coming together, the Father's light, the Father's Son, coming to a fertile ground in order to create life. Now, if your seed itself is a being of its own, it already is moving in its own way. It is already a cell that is alive very much. But in order for this cell to develop and grow, it needs a fertile ground, an environment from which it can feed and develop from, known as the mother's womb, once the egg, the ovum, is fertilized. But what came first? The chicken or the egg? Or was it the seed that led the chicken to said egg? And now, pardon the analogy, in terms of your seed, you would realize that it already is a moving live being. It is actively seeking to create its life. It's already at a purposefully deciding motion to arrive to be able to come to life. But in order to do so, it must find the egg. And it must get there first before all the rest, just as you did. Now, imagine if you're just wasting your seed. Well, you might as well say you're wasting life at that particular point. Because if you're not going to fertilize that seed, those are lives you're simply throwing away. If we're going to go into the pro-life choice all of a sudden, or pro-life, and the understanding that if we are to blame women in the pro-life aspect of things, saying, how can they go specifically get rid of said child irresponsibly? Meanwhile, you as a man, woman would not be at that particular standpoint if you yourself could hold your seed. Because the woman, the womb, is the fertile soil. And the egg is that which allows said seed to develop within said womb. It allows it to feed from said egg, just as a fertile soil when you plant a seed in the ground. And if you nourish it over time, it grows out of the ground, but the seed itself is already alive. And rather than looking at blaming women for having to bear the tough decision all of a sudden of, well, here's another man wasting his seed So why should I carry it? And that's the standpoint women have at this particular day and age. If a man is just going around wasting his seed, why should they have to carry it? If a man wishes to seek a fruitfulness of his coming forth, well, you might find that is in itself a temptation, being tempted by the fruit in a different analogy. And in this particular manner, the more you waste your seed, the less you value life. And the more easily you can blame your own problems onto another, which is meant to be your counterpart. And so even wasting seed through the act of keeping it in your hand, you're essentially wasting seed and letting it go to nothing. You're letting life go to nothing. And so as a pro-life individual, as a pro-life man, how can you specifically blame woman when you yourself can't even hold on to your seed? You might as well be pointing a barrel of a gun at your child at that point, because you're never going to let it live beyond that quick trigger, if you get the analogy. If a man learns to control a seed, he learns to control the environment around him. Because if you can control the environment, you can essentially generate at which rate this environment grows. And the less we control our seed, the less the environment grows in the way we can all together create a change. And so, in previous statements, I have possibly placed a notion towards abortion. Allow me to retract those away from the woman and place them onto you now as a man. Woman would not have to be there if you weren't just wasting your seed at that point. And that is entirely your particular fault at that time. Now, why would it possibly be seen in ancient times that the act of homosexuality was a sin? For the reason that if you're not going to plant your seed, you are wasting it. And that is the only reason homosexuality was seen as a sin. Which means even whether you are simply just rubbing one out, you might as well be sinning at that point too. That's about as serious as the sin of homosexuality is. It might as well just be rubbing one out. It's the same level of sin. That innocent, and yet that deeply guilty as well, because it is wasting life. You're not planting it to let it grow. And that life is going nowhere. Now you might say, well, that's the act of learning who you are. And you're absolutely right. Which at a certain point, once you learn who you are as a man, you begin to learn whether you are guided by temptation or virtue. And according to which valor you choose for yourself, you will see your successions and your life take on that trajectory. Thank you.